All right, this is Sam Renault. I'm joined today by John Martin. It is great to have you with us.
Good afternoon. Greetings from Charlotte, North Carolina. Thanks for having me on, Sam. Good to see you. John Martin. I work here at NASCAR. I've been in the sports business, probably about 30 years now, with a lot of different organizations you may or may not recognize. But I've learned quite a bit over the course of that time since I was a student, as you are now, and happy to share it with you.
We really appreciate it. I know you have a unique perspective and a really good understanding of what goes into the actual interviews when people are seeking jobs. I think your perspective and your insight and your take on the sort of the conversation between job seekers and job providers has been really helpful for me, I know, in my career and for a lot of students along the way. So really appreciative of your time and your wisdom here today. So if you're ready, we'll jump right in.
Yeah, I will say this before we jump in. Somebody had to teach me. So as I always say, the difference between me and students now is just number of years of experience. And so someone had to teach me, and I'm glad they taught me a lot of the sort of things that happen in interviews. And of course, I'm a very curious person myself, a lot of it. So don't think it's something you're supposed to know, but something you will learn and continue to learn as your career progresses. So let's jump right in, Sam.
Absolutely. No, that's great advice. Like everything, just like in sports and everywhere, it takes reps to get good. And so this is what it's all about. So John, let's start this from the very beginning. You are a job seeker. You have sat down now to what is most likely going to be a Zoom interview. What's your first step?
First step, I've already prepared for this interview and I've done my homework, and now the Zoom interview's ready to start.
Correct. Yep. Video's on. You're face to face with the hiring manager.
Okay. Yeah. The first obvious, easier said than done, is just to relax. An interview should be a conversation. And if you appear nervous, if you are nervous, just know that you've done a lot to even get to the interview phase. And the interview phase to me is also, it's sort of like that old joke about, if Sam and I are in the woods and there's a bear and the bear's coming at us, what do I have to do to survive? I just have to be faster than Sam. So you don't know who else is going to be interviewing. So your personality may click or may not click, but if you do or don't get that interview, it just might not have been the right time or the right fit for you. So I go back to take that attitude when you get started. So as soon as that camera clicks on, take a deep breath, relax, say hello as if you were talking to somebody you know, and you're excited for the opportunity to have the conversation and see how it goes.
It's good advice. It's casual and smile early and often.
And I don't think I'm faster than Sam, so the bear would probably get me at this point, but maybe back in the day I would have.
I don't know. You're around a lot of speed now with your role at NASCAR, so you probably picked up some tips. So thinking back, I mean, you've been on both sides of this, and you've impressed on both sides of this. But as the hiring manager, as the company seeking talent right now, what are you looking for in terms of etiquette from the person you're interviewing, and especially in this virtual world where everybody's going to be doing interviews over Zoom? I mean, how should they be using facial expressions and nonverbal communication and the mute button to make the most of this short opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing, of course, in any interview, whether it's Zoom or not, be on time, be prepared, and make sure you've gone on before. And again, you have to test out that you've got enough bandwidth and things are working well. Obviously, if you think you might be in a tough spot or you don't get a lot of bandwidth, I'd bring that up early. But in the Zoom world, we know it's not face-to-face. So you've got to talk about, okay, if I do break up, what would be our other alternative? Can I just call you back on a phone? It would even be considerate to say, let me make another plan. Eye contact through the Zoom is equally as important as eye contact in person. So know what you're looking at on your screen. So if I look at Sam right now, that's where Sam is to me. But so I feel like I'm looking at Sam, but I'm not. I need to look at the camera on my computer. So that's very critical for what you're doing there. And don't be surprised while it's odd. And, you say, well, you shouldn't do it. You look around, I'm looking at Sam again, and I'm looking at what's on his shelf. What's behind this person? Where are they? I don't want that to be distracting. Maybe I do want it to say something about me, but I don't want any of that background to take away from what I'm saying, what I'm doing. You'll notice there, if I use my hands or hand motions, probably ill-advised. As best as you can, stay relaxed. I'm trying to make eye contact and measuring my speech and my cadence of my speech. Speaking very quickly, while not great even in a live interview, is, I think, doubly troubling when you do it in a Zoom call. So take your time, take your cadence, pronounce your words properly and slowly. And that's really sort of the only additional hurdles you have than the normal etiquette. And I would still dress appropriately. Obviously, I came to work casual today. I would still dress appropriately. You can never overdress. And it shows a form of respect. And while that might not be sort of the dress code of your generation, clearly if you interview with someone of my generation, I take it as a positive. And you have to understand that person you are interviewing with. And you can even ask the recruiter, what would the dress code be for this interview? And if they're not sure, clearly at least a collared shirt, maybe even a blazer if you're a guy. But the appropriate dress for an interview would be important.
It's funny, as I've gotten, I mean, I've been on hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Zoom calls now, and I think my nonverbal communication has changed a lot. Whereas if I were in an in-person interview, I would kind of give a grunt of acknowledgement if somebody said something, and I would say, But in Zoom, that can cut off somebody else's audio. And so I find myself nodding aggressively a whole lot more than I would in person.
Correct.
And I'm afraid that may carry on into meetings.
Yeah, I do a lot of the, when you're in a group setting, it might not be for an interview, but you have to do a lot more hand too. And I mean, you're looking, you still want to sort of almost, it's a phrase, but you're leaning in, you're here, you're not back here, you're not sort of lifted off. You still want to give that same interested body language.
Absolutely. All right, so we're comfortable, we're talking, we're making eye contact, we're doing all the right things, our communication skills and our body language. So now let's get into the questions. So now you, again, as the company seeking talent, you've got a unique perspective on the needs of this position you're trying to fill. And there may be some things that you want to learn about the candidate that aren't necessarily going to be something you can intuit directly from their resume or their cover letter or whatever background checking you've done. So talk about some of the questions you're asking and what you're trying to learn from those questions.
Yeah, again, I have a style I have worked on over the years, but I break my style and my questions into, it's almost like doing a survey or doing research. I almost ask some of the same questions twice or three times so I can get a consistent answer, but I break it into three categories. I want, first of all, to understand your skills. What skills do you have as an employee? Secondly, I want to glean something about your personality. As I like to say, the relationships you've had in your life, but that can also tread on the edge of questions that are sometimes not allowed in interview settings. And then the third part is I want to understand exactly what kind of capacity you have for the job. So, I'll assume the capacity, though, if you've gone through some recruiters or you have a good resume, I can assume you have the skills to fulfill the job. Either you've got the experience we need, you've done a little bit of, accounting work if you're applying for an accounting job, or you've got some data analytics job if you're applying to be a data analyst. But I also want to get some capacity that you have the capability to handle what we're going to throw at. So, to glean your skills, a lot of times I will ask you questions that put you in an awkward situation. Ask you something that it seemed like a very odd question to you, but it's to see if you can think quickly on your feet. The famous question there is a number question. If I say, Sam, what kind of dancer are you between 1 and 10? I don't care if Sam says 2 or 9. My follow-up question was always 2, why 2? Because I want him to defend that position. A lead-in question you'll always get, which is, hey, tell me about yourself. I kind of don't really want to know where you're from and that you like sports. I want to know your skill sets. Are you organized? Are you analytical? Do you have a creative mindset? Are you curious? Do you like process? You're very, very planning oriented or event oriented. So those are the things that I'm trying to, again, figure out what skill sets you have, because for me, that puts you in the right position. If I've got a creative person in an operational role, that's a mistake I've made. I haven't figured out who the candidate is. So again, I try to figure out your skills. capacity? Do you have any experience? Can you give me any experience you've had in your past on your resume that would relate to what you're doing now? Or tell me a time when you did this. I always have a question of, tell me a time when you noticed this. And I'm asking you to tell me something in your resume that relates to what you'll have to do here. And then, what I always call it, again, we've talked about what skill sets you have, your capacity, and I always talk about sort of the stability. That's my third category. And I just need to know, what you're interested in, what you like to do, how long you might even be at this company. I can't directly ask you that, but I want to find out things you've done, long-term things you've done, what interests you, and do you have the sort of the personality that would fit with the team we have? Those are things you feel out in the interview. You might have a better idea of it, but that's part of the conversational nature of the interview, where I get a feeling for if you would be part of the team and how you would work with the team.
And now, as you ask all these questions, obviously you hope for pretty well thought out responses. Obviously the ideal candidate's going to prepare really well. But as you said, there are some roles where thinking on your feet and having a quick response to a really unexpected question can be, that's the answer in and of itself, that you're going to have that skill just because you answered the question, not because of what you answered with, right? Now, in return, it's typically expected that job seekers have good questions of their own to ask, whether it's at the end or kind of sprinkled throughout. That'll vary by the interviewer. But what questions have you heard in the past, and maybe even ones that you've asked yourself? I know early in your career, you did a really good job and made some strong impressions fresh out of your studies. What's a good question to ask? What's a bad question to ask? How should they be approaching that?
Yeah, I mean, we could go a couple of questions. Before we get to the bad questions, let's get into the good questions to ask. At least that have been asked of me. The one good one that came to me was the person had understood who they were interviewing and realized I was sort of 2 levels above the person they'd be working for. So they asked me what my management style was, and if I felt my management style was, making its way to all of the managers on the team. And I thought that was a highly insightful question, especially because it now gets me talking about my management style. And any question you ask that really gets the interviewer, the person on the other side about my company, talking about our company, is a good question. So in sales, they'll have a thing called open probe questions, closed probe questions. You never ask a closed probe question, which is sort of a yes or no answer. You want to ask an open-ended question. It's called open probe question. Anyway, it gets the person talking. What's your philosophy on this? Tell me about your company's culture and how you think that's going to affect your business outcomes. Things of that nature that are a little more thought out. Any research you can do to ask a sort of pointed question. Oh, I saw recently that you had this situation. What was that like for the company, and how did that affect sort of morale, or how did that affect the the business outcomes you guys have had this year? Those are always good questions to get someone talking. And then the flip side of that, I'll jump right in. Bad questions. Anything that has well, first of all, the worst thing you can do is say, no, I don't have any questions. That is a red flag right away. So have a question. And then anything related to sort of my pay, my benefits, my office hours, how often do I get reviewed? There's plenty of time for that later. This is still sort of a, you shouldn't be trying to get informational things about the HR aspects of your job. You should be talking about what the company's like. And then sometimes you have to be careful with a why question. Well, why did you do this? Or why does your company do that? Because any why question, and you find that as a manager as well, puts people on the defensive. Well, why did we do that? What they're hearing is, oh, you think we did something wrong, even though that might not be your intention. So you've got to be careful if you ask questions like that. A good question, again, what do you like about, or what do you see good here? What are the positive things have you seen that you think your company could do? And that's aspirational. Anything that gets you thinking that way. I think anything about the company culture is probably always good as well. Those are the things that are sort of layups that are pretty easy, I think.
So it seems like, I mean, the root of all of this is in your preparation, that you need to be thinking of really insightful questions. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel in terms of what you're asking, but you need to demonstrate that you've prepared, you've done your research, you know about not only the person you're speaking with, but the company that they work for and what it stands for. Right? And that's your ultimate goal, is to demonstrate that level of preparation.
Agreed. I think you can also sort of, if you want to, one of the other tricks I've heard is asking a question that places you already in the job in the mind of the person you're interviewing. So, what other departments would this candidate or this position most likely be interacting with? The person, the ideal candidate for this position in the next, 30, what would you expect of them in the next 30, 60, 90 days? If I was in this position in 90 days, what would I have to be able to accomplish at that point for you to think this was the correct hire? They're sort of, they can be leading, but anything that gets the person thinking, oh yeah, you asked me what it would be like to have you in this job. Let me explain to you what it would be like. And they're already thinking about you in that position. So those are some other questions you can ask if it gets to that point of, some people say, well, what would my day-to-day responsibilities be? That's fair. It's an okay one. I feel that's a little too common. Asking it just a little bit slightly, about what would be the good candidate and a good candidate after, 60 days, what would they be able to contribute, or expecting this person to contribute after 6 months? So it gets, again, the person who you're talking to picturing you in that position already.
You mentioned, and this is a little more tactical, and it sparked an idea in my head. I've been told in the past that it can be a good question to ask, like, by what measurements are you going to be analyzing my success or my performance? Is that something, because you mentioned not asking necessarily for direct feedback, but is that something you should get into?
I think you can do it in, a successful candidate for this position.
It's an easier question in like a sales role where there's going to be really objective measurements.
Correct. And you can even phrase it in some cases as just in general, right? Overall, people who are new hires, especially if you're just out of college and looking for work, or just, anyway, your first job or first, second job, asking that question can be insightful to say, I know this is going to be a transition for me. What are the expectations right out of the gate of sort of a new candidate? So I think, Sam, as you said, that's perfectly fair, and especially, reading the situation.
Now let's think about the sort of timing of some of these questions. And I want to get back into a couple other more question specific things. If we've reached you, we're clearly not in our first round of the interviews, right? I've gone through a recruiter, I've gone through some other stages most likely, and now you're probably going to be one of my last steps. When and with whom is it appropriate for me to start asking about salary and benefits and vacation? Because that's probably not you. So how does a seeker figure that part out?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's maybe the recruiter can give you that, what's the range? The recruiter should have sussed out pay range and benefits, and if it's all good for you. I think it's appropriate to ask about the process of how the person gets hired. When would I hear from you again? How many people would I have to interview? How long do you think it would take? And I think that's appropriate about the process of what it might take to get the job, because the assumption would be you're looking at other things as well, or right, I'm trying to manage my time and I just want to know, when I should be able to hear back, and how many other candidates you're looking for. When do you think you'd fill this role? I think, again, I'll call them process questions about how to get hired, but I'm not sure until you get the offer that you can go back and start asking about, okay, what are the benefits packages? Is there any negotiation of the salary? I think, especially that entry-level position, it's tough to ask that. Potentially as you move on in your career, then you can get a little more specific, because you've gained some experience, and then you can command a different sort of, again, salary level, benefit level, days off. Sometimes people will give you, in lieu of cash, a better work-life balance, or just a better place to live. I mean, that's becoming, obviously, working from home now. That's going to be a big part of it. Do I have to be in an office every day? Do I have to commute? Those will become reality. So, a long way to say, I'm not sure you want to get into days off and salary until you're really at the end and they're ready, prepared to make you an offer.
That's helpful to think through that. Now, I know you're neither an HR professional nor an attorney, but just generally speaking, the types of questions that interviewers are not allowed to ask, do you have some sense of?
Yeah, it's pretty clear. We're taught this quite a lot. I mean, you cannot ask, and it would be categories I'm assuming you all know. I cannot ask anything about race, religion, sexuality, pregnancy. Do you plan on being pregnant? Do you want to have children? Disabilities, how old are you? When did you graduate? Or when did you say you graduated? Age, marital status, children, your genetics, your history, like, where are your family from? Germany? Where are you from? What part of the country did you come from? All of that is not allowed. You should stay away from any of that stuff. And even as you progress in your career as a manager, I cannot give preferential treatment to anyone. This person has 5 kids and one of them's sick and they're all homeschooled, and then this person lives by themselves and can dedicate time that they want. I have to treat them the same. I can't give this person a break and that person a break. The expectation is that everyone is treated equally. Now, again, as a manager, you take considerations, you understand work-life balance, but you can't treat people differently. And it's really, as you move on in your career, any difference. In fact, we here at our company are really looking at differences, and difference can be difference in age, difference in experience, difference in part of the country where you grew up. Obviously, besides all the differences in diverse ethnicities and things of that nature, but people just have different background experiences. So this person's got a legal degree, but we're going to put them in a different role. Just people who think differently in different roles has really turned out to be more creative for us than we thought. Hey, I'm a car guy, but now I've suddenly got into data analytics. I mean, the best example here for NASCAR is we had a guy who was a tire changer who's now one of our top data scientists, who just did some online courses and really liked what he was doing and had the brain for it. But we probably wouldn't have thought about that. We thought, okay, he knows he's a tire changer, put him in with the aviation crew. Who knew, but it's interesting. People who are curious and getting that diverse background really helps across the entire company.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of value in just finding the right people. If the experience isn't there, you assume the right person can learn it and pick it up. Yeah. I think the job seeker is going to glean a lot of that. If you ask the right questions, you'll learn about that. I mean, if the organization is not allowed to ask about your family situation or your ability to balance work and life, you can ask questions about management style and workplace culture to make sure that you're a good fit without making them dive into questions they're not supposed to be asking. So I think it's a valuable perspective you need to keep.
Yeah, correct. I tell you, going back to that first question, the person asked the management style, and I told them, yeah, I want my employees to have work-life balance. I want them to make sure they enjoy working for the company, and I want to make sure everything's going well for them, not only in their professional life, but also in their personal life. And you say that and think, oh, what a nice guy, but it's really not because I'm a nice guy. It's because if I do that, you'll stay with my company longer, and I keep you and have retention. Because once you lose an employee, especially in some of the roles I have, that is such a gaping hole to fill, and it's hard to gain that level of experience of someone who's been at a racetrack, done some of the technical work, or done some data analytics on massive, SQL databases or large data sets. You just can't, pick that off a tree and bring it back in here. So it's work-life balance. I want people to have fun, but it's selfish for the company, and it's good for everyone. So those are the things you'll notice, and you can get a feel for when you ask questions the right way.
So, well, John, I really appreciate it. Any last kind of pearls of wisdom you want to share before we wrap up?
No, here's the one thing I say, and it goes back to an old adage I heard, which was a salesman, a guy selling sponsorships. And he said, there are no bad sponsorship ideas, or no bad marketing ideas. The timing was just wrong. So I'm going to keep that idea, and I know it's going to be right for somebody at some time. So take that sort of mentality when you go in for your interview. The timing might not be right, or you might not have been just right for that role, or you know what, that role would have been perfect for you, but man, they had a candidate with just 2 more years of experience than you, and they were just the better candidate. So it just wasn't, again, the right time. Don't get down on that. Keep the positive attitude. You'll find a break. Everyone does. You just have to sort of persevere, especially through tougher times and times when you think, oh, you know, that's the only one I've got. Keep the conversations going. Get yourself a lot of opportunities. And I think if you always remember that there is the opportunity out there for you that you're going to benefit from, it's just a question of finding it. You'll be fine.
We really appreciate it, John. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom.
Sam, always a pleasure. Good luck, everyone. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much.